So Ohio State plays Oregon in the Rose Bowl. The winner gets Texas or Arizona State in the Cotton Bowl. It's part two of what was probably the game of the year. At least one side seems to be talking like that was game of the year, and this is going to be part two for that. I'm Stephen Means, that's Stefan Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. We are inside the Sheraton Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and we're getting ready to go over to Pasadena and watch us a little ball game. These are our game time decisions. This is the thing that we think could potentially decide the game. Stefan, where are you going?
Yeah, I'll start with the defensive back, specifically Ohio State's corners, right? That was one area where we saw Denzel Burke probably have his worst game of the season. I wouldn't even say probably. That was his worst game of the season. And we've talked all week on the podcast of we're pretty confident that that won't happen again, right? Like Oregon is going to face a better version of Denzel Burke. Well, then we also got Davison Igbinosun on the other side, right? He's someone who's been prone to get some penalties, holding pass interference throughout this season. So Oregon is going to attack these corners. They saw in October that they can have some success. Maybe not to the same degree this time around, but they can have some success. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them attack Denzel, attack Davison early, and try to expose some things and see early on, okay, are those guys on their A game? And if they are, if Denzel and Davison are playing well, then Oregon can kind of adjust their game plan. But first thing if I'm Oregon is going to see, can I beat those corners? If you can, boom, keep going at them all game. If not, then you got to adjust. And if they're playing better, you got to adjust. So that's the one thing where I want to see early on is what do Denzel and Davison look like, because I think that's going to dictate how Oregon potentially calls this game, the remainder of the contest.
And I think everybody immediately goes to Denzel Burke because of how things looked in the last game. 7 targets, 7 catches, 160-plus yards, 2 touchdowns. And so I get that. But then you talk to these Oregon receivers, and it doesn't sound like the plan was to go at Denzel Burke and get 7 for 7 for 160-plus and 2 touchdowns. It sounds like that happened in real time, where Denzel Burke gave up that first one where we looked at each other and went, he got his eyes caught in the backfield. And then it just kept happening. And that's when you adjust in real time and go, we're going to attack this guy instead. I think the bigger the bigger conversation is with Davison Igbinosun on the other side. Tez Johnson called Denzel Burke the smartest cornerback he's ever played against. He said it's him and Kool-Aid McKinstry. It's because he played Kool-Aid in high school. He had good things to say about Caleb Dallas. He had good things to say about Lathan Ransom. He had good things to say about Jordan Hancock. Then he got to Davison Igbinosun, and he said some compliments, but you could see on his face. I wish people could have seen his face answering this question. It was almost like he had something he wanted to say, but he knew camera was on, so he couldn't say it. And he said, good corner, rangy corner, played in the SEC. But we know his weaknesses, and we're going to be on high alert from that. We know what his weaknesses are, too. And it seems like Oregon was prepared to attack that on October 12th, and then things happened with Denzel Burke, and so the game plan changed a little bit. So I'm with you. That's something you got to keep an eye on. Andrew, what do you want to look for?
Well, just to add on to that real quick, it's who they attack and kind of when they attack them, right? Because, there were various levels of this where last game it might be Denzel Burke, and this game it might be Jordan Hancock. They think that they could win that matchup. Like Tez Johnson said, I'm looking forward to that matchup all night. Jordan Hancock beat me the last time, and he was, very motivated by that. But the thing that also plays into this that I'm keeping an eye out for is the pass rush. Because we could talk about Denzel Burke, and we could talk about the mistakes that happened in the secondary. We could talk about Oregon's receivers. Those were loud mistakes. Those were loud problems for Ohio State. The biggest problem, I think, that hit Ohio State, or the second biggest problem, I should say, was that they didn't affect Dillon Gabriel a lot, I don't think. I don't think that they got in his face enough. I don't think that they got him on the ground enough, because they didn't. I don't think that they did enough to cause havoc on that offensive line for Oregon and for Dillon Gabriel, because so much of what Oregon wants to do is timing, right? It's quick. They run this RPO stuff where it's, Dillon Gabriel will fake the handoff, and then it's a quick slant over the middle, or, they'll fake the handoff, and all of a sudden you've got a defensive back flat-footed, like Denzel Burke happened in the last game, and you've got somebody deep. You've got Johnson deep. You've got Stewart deep. You've got Holden deep. You've got somebody deep because the play had time and the play was kept on rhythm. I want to see Ohio State's defensive line and how they are going to answer that challenge, because we're going to talk so much about Denzel Burke and Davison, and the fans want to do that, and I get that. But that's not going to matter as much if you are getting pressure on Dillon Gabriel, which they could not do last time. So if Ohio State gets pressure on Oregon's front, on Oregon's offense, I think Oregon's going to have some hard times, because you look back at some of their games, I don't know how much Dillon Gabriel has really had to been sped up. I don't know how much that offense has really had to be sped up. And I think when you map out paths to victory for Ohio State, it involves getting Oregon out of rhythm, and that is one way to do it. Not just, hey, you got to play better in the secondary. It's you got to play better up front too, because like I said, the defensive line, they don't get, I don't think, the grief that they should for that game, because I don't think that defensive line caused enough pressure on Dylan Gabriel.
They didn't play well.
We've made it to person number 3 without mentioning Ohio State's offensive line.
That was the upset with me. That was the upset with me.
New record.
I'm not going to do it either. Defensive line needs to play better. Now, there's been some schematic changes that could help with that. But if JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are 80, 70% of what they were against Tennessee, that's good enough in my book. I'm not going to miss any offensive line because we know. Can the offensive line do what it did against Penn State? Can it do what it did against Tennessee? And that's, can you scheme it up in a way to where, and they hold up long enough that they can execute the way they want to execute? That's not a underrated thing. It's like the thing. So it's not even worth mentioning at this point. And Donovan Jackson has gone up against enough first-round NFL talent at this point that I'm not worried about him anymore, right? He's gone up against Abdul Carter. He's gone up against James Pierce. He's gone up against Michael Kamara, right? He's gone up against guys at this point. So I'm not worried about him. So I'm not going to spend another 15 minutes here sitting here going, the offensive line's a problem. We know. But it's a problem that can't be fixed until the offseason gets here anyway. Here's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go with an X factor. Here's what I think decides the game. If Travion Henderson has at least 3 catches. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are a perfect marriage as a running back tandem. One is a heck of a in-between the tackles. He is the time to put the game away running back. And who was out there against Penn State when they were putting that game away? Quinshon Judkins. And they offset it a little bit with Travion. What was Travion Henderson's most impactful game of the season this year? What would you say?
Probably Tennessee.
Tennessee's probably a good answer.
And he had 5 catches and 10 carries. He had 15 touches, and 5 of them were catches. Get him in space, and nobody knows what to do with him. Nobody. And that's why they're a perfect marriage. You got one guy who's more the traditional give me the ball 20 times guy on the ground. You got another guy who is explosive. You've got this is your daily dose of an apple a day keeps the doctor away. A Quinshon Judkins a day keeps the defensive lineman away. But then you've got we need to hit a home run. We need to punch Oregon in the face and land a haymaker. That is Travion Henderson, and he's done it. He did it against Oregon last time. He had like a 40-yard run against Oregon the last time. In fact, in that game and in the Tennessee game, Quinshon Judkins had 10 carries, and he had 23 yards. Travion Henderson had 10 carries, and he had 80 yards, and a lot of it was on one play. This is a haymaker game. So you need your guys who are throwing their best punches to throw their best punches. That's Jeremiah Smith, it's Emeka Egbuka, and it's Travion Henderson. He's got to land 1 or 2 punches, whether as a receiving threat or an explosive run where he hits a hole and he's gone. So for me, yes, offensive line, defensive line, all that stuff, yes. But we all know that. I don't know if I was thinking about Travion Henderson this way until I rewatched the Tennessee game and realized he constantly turned checkdowns into explosive plays, and that's what makes him so special. Get the text 614-350-3315 and go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. Stefan, Andrew, and Steven, Ohio State, Oregon, Part 2. See you after the game.